And again, just want to mention, I'm Ellen Southern. I'm with Site Story. We are a consultant to environmental nonprofits, and we also help build capacity for local governments. This is my last education session with the Seattle 2030 District. I've been here for 3.5 years and am moving on, but grateful to be here for an early session working with the city of Bellevue. For folks who are joining us for the first time in recent months, we did expand to Bellevue this year and are excited about the potential to have positive impacts in Bellevue in the same ways that the 2030 district has been able to work in Seattle and move the dial around sustainability, climate resiliency, and commercial development. So our network is quite large across the country. We have we were born out of the Architecture 2030 goals, and we currently have 24 districts in North America. And collectively, the districts represent 580 million square feet of commercial office space, and that does include some mixed-use housing. We have goals, as I mentioned, that are targeted at the year 2030. This was done incrementally. We are the oldest chapter in the country. We started 11 years ago. Is that right? Yes, 11 years ago, almost 12 years. And so our program has upped the ante a number of times in terms of where we go with our benchmarking. And currently, we are looking at a 50% reduction in energy, water, and transportation impacts within our districts. And we approach existing buildings, renovations and retrofits, with an 80% reduction in energy, 50% reduction in water and transportation, aiming at 90% by 2025, and then carbon neutral and getting to net zero by 2030. In Bellevue alone, we already have 26 members committed, and we already have 10.6 million square feet committed in terms of commercial space. So we're off to a good start. I did want to thank Boeing today. Boeing is the sponsor of some of our stormwater work this year and has been very generous in helping with our outreach in Bellevue. So thank you to Boeing, who is a long-term funder and sponsor of our program, and of course plays a great role in supporting sustainability, climate resiliency, and particularly stormwater projects in our region. I just wanted everybody to take a minute and think about the fact that we are part of an amazing watershed. We are the second largest estuary in the country, second to the Chesapeake Bay. When you think about it, every living species, every breathing thing, and every site is part of a watershed. And our watershed in particular is 42,800 kilometers, which is equal to 26,000 miles. We've got over 10,000 rivers, creeks, and streams that feed into Puget Sound. And that means as stormwater is moving across our sites, our land, our properties, and our developed properties, it is carrying all the contaminants that exist on those surfaces into this water. And then just drilling down a little bit, City of Bellevue is part of the Lake Washington Sammamish watershed. And so that is the watershed that's highlighted here that is part of Greater Puget Sound. Just also want to mention there's over 200 species of fish in Puget Sound, and many of those fish are making their way into the watershed. And again, just putting Bellevue into the context of its downtown being so close. This is Maidenbower Bay, but Bellevue also has an impact on Sammamish Lake as well. And then just thinking about the trials and tribulations of salmon in particular, Salmon come and go from our watersheds out to the Pacific and back. They have quite the complicated corridor of migration. And this is just a migration corridor map of the species of salmon that move through the Pacific Ocean into Lake Washington, Lake Sammamish, the upper tributaries and the upper part of the watershed, and then back out. In particular, in this watershed, Chinook, chum, sockeye pink, and coho are the prevalent species, as well as cutthroat bull trout and steelhead. Jeremy later is going to mention Sturtevant Creek, but Sturtevant Creek is in the heart of Bellevue and adjacent to the commercial business district. In recent years, there have been Chinook spotted, or excuse me, sockeye spotted in Sturtevant Creek. Sockeye makes up 10% of the orca's diet, and in neighboring British Columbia is actually a endangered species. It's not been listed here in the U.S. yet. However, Chinook is an endangered species here in the U.S., and we are in Chinook territory when we're talking about Bellevue. So when you think about water quality in Bellevue and how important it is, consider this map and consider that the migration corridors to get to their spawning grounds, it's critical that the stormwater runoff in Bellevue is addressed, and it's critical that we find ways to treat it and to consider strategies for stormwater moving forward. So with that, I would like to introduce, we have an amazing panel, a group of people that I have worked with on more than one occasion, folks that are just warriors in terms of watershed health. Our first speaker is Jason Henry, who is a principal with the Berger Partnership, and Berger has been at the forefront of really an industry leader around sustainability, but in particular watershed health. And I will note that I got to work closely with the Berger Partnership in recent years because they became one of the first Salmon Safe accredited design firms in our region. Also with us today is Jeremy Febus, who's a principal at KPFF. And Jeremy, again, has done some amazing work with our team and has been providing pro bono services to the Seattle 2030 district. But Jeremy's also a known leader in terms of really creative problem solving around the stormwater issue and water quality. And KPFF, the firm, has been a leader in many ways on many projects, including the Swale on Yale, the Aurora Bridge bioswales, and more recently a number of projects in Bellevue. And then we also have Ella Sandquist, who is my partner in crime, who took my place running the urban program for Salmon Safe. Ella came from the construction industry, from Bailey Construction, but she also has a background in biology, and she is the new Puget Sound director for Salmon Safe. And I promise you, as up to as much mischief and fun as I was running the Salmon Safe program. So I think you'll enjoy hearing from these three industry leaders, and they have a lot of great things to share. So we're going to kick off with Jason.
Hey, thanks, Ellen. Thanks for the great intro. I know this is a discussion about Bellevue, but I'm going to start with a picture of Seattle. This is South Lake Union, and it's been a spot that's kind of been throughout my entire career at Berger. So when I started 27 years ago at Berger, started working on REI. And if you go a couple of slides forward here, Ellen, or Riley, whoever has control, go one more. Yep. So this is, I'm going to talk a little bit about, there's 4 projects in this kind of 4-block area. REI is down in that lower right corner. Cascade Park and Playground, Sitka, and then Stackhouse, which were both 2 projects that we did with Vulcan and looked at Salmon Safe for both. But it's really, to go forward, I'll look at kind of a historic watershed too. And one of the things that we often do when we're kind of looking at these projects, and this is like, what does the pre-development pattern look like? Kind of where was the water flowing? Where did it naturally want to go in these drainage basins? So this is the USGS topo viewer, but you can see kind of what the topography used to look like before it became built out. Next slide. So you can see REI in the upper left-hand corner, and was kind of revolutionary this time, introducing native plant materials, and particularly a conifer forest into the urban grid was unheard of, but hugely successful. Also, it was one of the first projects utilizing stormwater. Little known fact, there is that recirculating waterfall, but it actually does take stormwater from the roof and integrate it into that feature. And it was an important thing just to highlight awareness of rain events, and we really wanted this to be an immersive experience. Cascade Park and Playground in the lower left after that came, just kind of kitty corner. We worked on that, and really fundamental to that concept was kind of daylighting that stream that you see in that section there, trying to highlight some of that historical water movement in the watershed. Stackhouse lower right was after that. That was also the first phase in Swale on Yale, as Ellen mentioned. That was really important for its time, and we had done pro bono work with SPU and Vulcan on shredding different ideas amongst a lot of other design professionals. And it was really, I think, foundational for setting the stage for allowing that to happen and having this kind of joint collaboration between Seattle Public Utilities and a private developer. And then lastly is Sitka, which is in that upper right corner. This is a photo taken right after construction. You can see the second phase of the Swale on Yale, integrating a lot of what we knew about stormwater management on site, also becoming Salmon Safe certified through the process. You go to the next slide. This one I love just because it shows the public right away, and it's kind of that division between the Swale and Yale on the right and this interaction between public-private, very literally. And so the stormwater planters and the bioretention are on the left side, had an all-native palette. We utilized gray water for irrigation, all Salmon Safe materials, so we eliminated all galvanized and copper-coated materials from the material palette, and it's been hugely successful. I wanted to share this too. This is just a great graphic from Seattle SPU. And then the upper left, this is from their Power of Water series. If you haven't seen that, I highly encourage people to check it out. Showing that image in the upper left of the pre-development pattern, kind of what the status quo is in the middle, and then kind of like the way we envision this, the integration of green and stormwater improvements into the bottom left there. And that's really kind of the way that we're thinking about these opportunities. Less about property lines, more about kind of the way the watershed functions, but obviously doing it kind of contextually on a project basis. Moving over to Bellevue, we're doing a number of projects in Bellevue, and kind of just wanted to highlight a few things, and particularly in 3 different watersheds, and I know Jeremy's going to talk a little bit more about this too. Sturdivant Creek Basin, we sort of 2 projects that I think are interesting in different ways. One is Surrey Downs Park, which is the star down on the lower left and lower part of the watershed, but still up on the ridge, sort of not directly at the mouth as you think it might be, kind of given its location. It is that upper photo in the middle part of the slide. Big public park project, and does have stormwater integrated on it from all on site, which is that rain garden and bioretention area down below. That middle photo, it's beautiful, but it could really be, and I think parks and open space are a great opportunity to potentially integrate stormwater from other sources, whether they be public or private. The second one is in the upper part up above Lake Bellevue, formerly Lake Sturdivant, which is the 12th Place Apartments, which is phase 1 of the Pine Forest MDP, just a little bit west of Spring District, and you can see that diagram in the upper right where that site sits in context. So as the headwaters of the Lake Sturdivant watershed, even though it is just private development, I think it is a really important piece. Those are all the historic wetlands that used to feed into that creek and lake. And ecologically, we've got a similar ethos that we're trying to impart on that particular design, doing native forest. And we will ideally have some stormwater and bioretention as part of the site. Next slide, please. Clyde Beach area, we actually were recently selected to do phase 2 on Maidenbower Park. So we are just starting in on that. And again, it's kind of an excellent opportunity to do some daylighting and stormwater improvements. This is a little bit more of a sort of tactical intervention, if you will. Phase 1 on the left of that big curved dock form that was done by Anchor QEA. And we are doing phase 2 that'll tie in, not only in terms of people connections, but ideally in terms of ecological and stormwater connections as well. The photo in the middle of the part of the slide is from where Anchor did a daylighting project on phase 1. You can see that little bit of creek mouth as it exits into Lake Washington. I think it's another good opportunity for understanding kind of what we can do as part of a public park project. And then next slide. And lastly, this is the Valley Creek Basin, which actually feeds the entirely other direction. And this is a little neighborhood park that we're doing for bridle trails. Again, salmon-bearing stream, but a very different character in terms of a lot of wooded environment. This is currently under construction, should be open in 2024.
Thanks, Jason. So again, thanks for the kind introduction, Ellen. Jeremy Febus at KPFF, and diving in here. I'm really proud of the work we've done in Bellevue, some with others on this call, and including Jason and Ella. And also, I'm not going to beat around the bush or try and convince anyone that about Bellevue being easier or more open to innovative ideas than it currently is. So we'll kind of talk through the good and the bad, I think, here. Let's flip to the next slide, please. So first project I want to talk about in the downtown area. It's project Bellevue Garage, pretty innovative approach by Pistachia Development and Encore Architects for as a landscape architect. It's taking an existing garage building in the downtown Bellevue area. That's Northeast 8th in the front of the photo there. And instead of tearing the garage down, it's actually building apartments around the garage, kind of in that Texas donut, as it's sometimes called, style. But instead of building it from the ground up, it's building it around a building that's there already. Bellevue, if you flip to the next slide, Jason and I had our minds were thinking alike, I think there, that with the setup that Ellen provided of the really trying to think about this from a watershed mentality with each of my projects, just like Jason did. I'm going to show you how they relate to the creek systems and the watersheds of Bellevue. So Sturdivant Creek runs along 405, like's been shared. Our project's that starred location on the far left. So downtown Bellevue breaks towards Sturdivant Creek to the east and towards Maidenbower Bay to the west. Bellevue, like a lot of Seattle, parts of Renton, Tacoma, has a historic impervious percentage exception from Department of Ecology. And so within parts of downtown Bellevue, projects are not required to restore runoff to a forested condition like they are in most of the Puget Sound area. This project is within a historic impervious area. If you flip to the next slide. So because it has an existing footprint and we largely are building around it, there isn't much required out here. But I wanted to highlight one thing that was possible here in Bellevue that I haven't seen allowed in other jurisdictions in the greater Seattle area, which was it's common for us to put detention under buildings. It's common for us to put detention integral to a building structure. Sometimes we move away from that and do detention tanks under a building. Bellevue is willing to work with us to do kind of a proprietary storage system under the building. We had a pretty small footprint, which is just that area in red, under the new footprint of the building, the orange in the front. And so I kind of wanted to give Bellevue props on one thing here and note that they were willing to work with us on some innovative proprietary systems to try and fit construction schedule and work with a system that has a little bit more flexibility to fit inside of structural elements underneath the building. If you flip to the next one, please. So I saw Brandon's on here. So this is now a Vulcan project, Ondina project in Belred. I'm going to talk about before it was a Vulcan project during the entitlements and a bunch of coordination when Summerhill was the developer with the city on stormwater regulations in the area. Runberg's the architect, Hewitt's landscape architect on this one. So we flip to the next. So we're in the Gulf Creek Basin then here. It's one of the smaller creek systems in and of itself within the city of Bellevue, but it's a tributary to Kelsey Creek, which, you know, someone tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure Kelsey Creek is the largest creek system when you can include its tributaries in the city here. So our project on this one is right on Gulf Creek, like it almost literally there in that starred spot, kind of bottom middle. If you go to the next slide. Okay, so we spent months during the ADR process with Bellevue on this site. I think if I the point I want to get to here is unlike Seattle and Tacoma, Everett, like where a lot of the natural creek systems have unfortunately been piped and undergrounded and are deep underground, or in some cases just we don't know where they even were anymore. Bellevue still has a lot of open creek systems throughout the city. They have comprehensive plan and city goals of daylighting and enhancing those watersheds with more natural systems. I wanted to talk about here kind of a disconnect that unfortunately exists that I'm hoping others will try again, and that because this project wasn't able to make it work, that it won't still be possible elsewhere. Gulf Creek, like a lot of these creek systems, particularly east of 405, are intermittent open channel. You can see the open channel portion kind of stretching off to the top left, and then pipe intervals through the sub area. So the city has a stated goal of wanting to daylight Gulf Creek. During Sound Transit construction of Northeast Spring Street as a SEPA mitigation, Sound Transit actually put in a bottomless culvert. It's there physically right now, that red rectangle that's on there. When the original developer approached this site, they're not local. There were no altruism or strong environmental ethos or anything, but there was smart business mind and wanting to do the best project they could. They knew that even though this is a TOD area, Bellevue still requires quite a bit of green space at ground level and building setbacks, ground level play areas, maximum impervious percentage, which are kind of unusual in a TOD area, but Bellevue still requires them. So we had ground level space to work with. We had substantial right-of-way improvements, and we proposed to the city of Bellevue that we would do a daylighting of Gulf Creek, something like, if I should have put a picture on here, but if some of you are familiar, like with the Horse Creek daylighting in Bothell, or the Lion Creek daylighting in Lake Forest Park, like where you keep it to a very small footprint so that it doesn't disincentivize the developer from doing it by impacting yield, but it still is a substantial increase in this habitat and ecology compared to the pipe system. And so what we had proposed to Bellevue was that we modify the road section on 132nd to try and do something like the Horse Creek daylighting idea, and we proposed to planning that we reduce the setbacks and we reduce the play area and ground level landscape requirements so that the building could shift eastward and so that it could fit and work without losing yield. Unfortunately, because Bellevue and Sound Transit didn't get along very well when Sound Transit was planning this corridor through here, Bellevue had no part in the placement of this bottomless culvert and had no investment in utilizing it. There's no requirement on this project. Bellevue was unwilling to flex its road requirements in 132nd or give up any of its kind of standard asks out here. And so unfortunately, this creek will stay in the pipe here for the next 75 years or so, in all likelihood, or more. So I bring this up as a missed opportunity, and you're going to see this at other points. I'm sure some of you do or have. And I hope that as an industry, we keep taking a run at it and seeing if we can come up with something better. Next slide. Something I want to point out about Bellevue too, that I think there's a policy and code opportunity, and this is just one example, but this applies throughout the city. Bellevue does not, so whether you use the terminology of on-site stormwater management, which is the term Bellevue uses, or LID, or green stormwater infrastructure, City of Bellevue does not recognize a benefit from green stormwater infrastructure that doesn't also infiltrate. And so green roof, non-infiltrating bioretention, pervious pavement have no regulatory benefit in terms of stormwater guidelines. So we're working on that. I bring it up here because I hope we're all working on that and trying to shift mindsets there in the city. The city allows the use of all of those systems on site, and there's incentives for developers to use them anyway, just to add urban nature and green space and amenities to their sites, but they don't factor into the stormwater compliance or calculations. Let's go to the next slide. One innovative thing I did want to call out on this project specifically is, most, with Redmond's a significant exception, but most of the metro area, we don't have permeable soils underneath the site. There are pockets of soils throughout the Bellred area, particularly where there are well-draining soils. Unfortunately, there's also high groundwater in those areas. This site, so we had high groundwater on the site. You could almost think of the building being like a rock in the river or a pebble in the stream, that seasonal high groundwater is forced to go around it. And a lot of times it's just collected through perimeter or underslab drainage systems and then dropped into the municipal system, or the building is constructed to hold back that water at a very high cost. This project, we worked really closely with the geotechnical engineer to bypass that groundwater. There are pockets of really porous, well-draining material at the downhill edge of the site, and so we, on a subsurface level, routed the water around the building to put it back into the groundwater system on the low side of the building, which I think was pretty unique, and Bellevue was willing to work with us on. The last project here, if we flip to the next one, Highland Park. This was the same developer that started the Ondina project that Vulcan later acquired. So this is at the east end of the Bellred sub-area. If you flip to the next screen, it's in the Valley Creek basin, which is also a tributary of Kelsey Creek. And this project's also in really close proximity to the creek. If you flip to the next screen, so this project included some habitat restoration and accessibility there's a significant city park bordering on the site to the south there, Highland Park, that the project is also named for. We had a challenge, I don't know a city where this isn't a challenge, but had a challenge kind of engaging Parks and Rec along with development services to integrate elements along that shared boundary, where the project was willing to make some improvements at the park edge, but ultimately we're able to get a restoration area at that far west edge of the site. If you flip to the next screen, wanted to kind of highlight some policy issues that we keep seeing flipping back and forth in Bellevue right now, and there's some challenges here. So one, public versus private rainfall runoff. Bellevue in the past has allowed the mingling of public and private water. Like those of you that do a lot of work in Seattle know that that's an absolute no. But on the east side, most cities allow it. We've seen recently, like on that Andina project, they allowed it. All of the road mitigation for the road improvements went into a vault on the private property. On Highland Park, with the same developer in the same sub area, just a few months later, they said no and required us to put in a pretty complex mix of vaults and detention tanks in the right of way. Since then, we've seen the city flip back to, yes, they will allow public runoff on private property, which we think is a more efficient outcome and in the public interest. But it is something I want to highlight here. The other is that Bellevue has always been resistant to pumping stormwater. So a lot of areas of the city require much larger vaults than you would see like in Seattle, unless you're in the historic impervious area. And Bellevue really wants to see, has a very strong preference for those vaults to outfall by gravity to the municipal conveyance system. You can imagine in most cases that conveyance system in the street isn't deep enough to do that from a subterranean level in the building. And so strict adherence to the city's policies would require developers to give up a significant part of their ground level building outside, if it's outside of the downtown area, for stormwater. City seems to us to be digging in on that more, and where they were occasionally allowing it by exception, the pumped solution, they are doing that less and less. I'll stop there. I could go on, but if you flip to the next screen, I think that's it. So I'll hand it off to Ella.
All right, thanks, guys. You guys are both hard to follow, but and thank you, Ellen, for the wonderful introduction. I really appreciate it. My name is Ella Sandquist, and I am the Puget Sound Director of Salmon Safe. We are a performance-based system focused on the biological needs of salmon. In urban environments, that is a focus on stormwater management, water quality, water conservation, native habitat, and integrated pest management. So we plug into various places within urban projects, but the best place that to include Salmon Safe is really in the early design phase. Next slide, please. Our goal during construction is zero sediment runoff. Often stormwater management is overlooked during the construction phase of urban projects. Next slide. I'm going to present 3 projects that are well beyond compliance and making an impact in Bellevue. The first one is the 8. This 540,000 square foot, 25-floor commercial building in downtown Bellevue. The design reduces the overall impervious area by 1/10 of an acre and reduces the pollution generating impervious surface by over 1/2 an acre. The stormwater is managed using a combination of stormwater treatment methods, including an existing detention vault on the west side of the site, multiple contact treatment cartridges, and a series of planters that capture and treat runoff from the majority of the plaza. The plaza planters are a new type of cell stormwater management system that is key to the project reaching certification. These cells will catch, filter, and slow the release of all stormwater before it ultimately gets conveyed to the dedicated stormwater conveyance system that discharges into Lake Washington. The GSI on this project is estimated to divert 425 acre-feet per year of stormwater, or roughly 210 Olympic-sized swimming pools. The second project that I want to show is West Main. This is a 3-building project. It will include 35,000 square feet of retail and 1 million of office. The stormwater management system for this project includes 6 bioretention cells, totaling 6,000 square feet, located on the east and west perimeters of the site. These bioretention cells will treat stormwater from pollution-generated hardscapes. Additionally, stormwater from an adjacent site totaling roughly 11,000 square feet will also be treated using the bioretention cells. The GSI on this project is estimated to divert 783 acre-feet per year of stormwater, or roughly 386 Olympic-sized swimming pools. I'm just gonna take a drink of water, sorry. All right, next slide. All right, the final project is 555-108. The stormwater management system for this project includes 3 bioretention cells totaling roughly 900 square feet, and a series of landscaped areas at grade. Together, these will catch, filter, and slow the release of all stormwater from the roof before it is conveyed to the city storm system. Runoff from surface level pollution generating hard surfaces and impervious surfaces will be treated before discharge into the storm system using a 4 by 6 foot biofilter planter. Sorry. This system will also treat some of the stormwater runoff from 108th Avenue right of way. The developer attempted a regional stormwater facility in the right of way to treat stormwater from adjacent sites, but a pathway for a public-private partnership was not available. Salmon Safe would encourage that on future projects. The GSI on this project is estimated to divert 207 acre-feet per year of stormwater, or roughly 102 Olympic-sized swimming pools. So an example of a successful public-private partnership is the Swale on Yale, which I think Jason, you had mentioned earlier. This project exemplifies Salmon Safe's urban development principles by going beyond compliance, creating a district-scale green stormwater infrastructure project, enhancing urban ecological function, and being maintained in a low-input manner. This Vulcan project included Berger as the landscape architect and KPFF as the civil. The Swale on Yale is treating stormwater from 425 acres on Capitol Hill. Vulcan voluntarily created a regional stormwater detention site in the right-of-way. Like the Swale on Yale, the Aurora Bridge project is another public-private partnership solving the stormwater problem. We encourage all municipalities to think about stormwater right-of-way treatment and to create pathways for these partnerships. This project included KPFF as the civil and Weber Thompson as the landscape architect. Developer incentives offered by municipalities are a catalyst for GSI to be included in urban developments. Here is a summary of the types of Salmon Safe incentives we've seen implemented or are in the process of being implemented in Washington. Hopefully, after this presentation today, some of the pending incentives with Bellevue will be adopted. The 2 incentives that apply best to Central Business District of Bellevue and have strong developer interest are reduced permitting fees and floor area ratio incentives. Nearly a decade ago, the USGBC reviewed Salmon Safe standards and ruled that Salmon Safe requirements exceeded the LEED rating system with respect to watershed impacts. We encourage Bellevue and all municipalities to look outside LEED to create a framework for developer incentives. And finally, Salmon Safe will be hosting a park system stormwater park webinar in January. We are having experts discussing how to incorporate Salmon Safe within PRO's plans to build climate resiliency into public spaces. Please reach out to myself or Ellen, and we can send you the registration link.
Thank you all. I'm going to stop sharing the PowerPoint now so that we can get into a conversation. And just want to welcome everyone back to, if you want to open your mics or share your screens. We'd love to have a conversation with you and field questions that you might have for us. And we've got a few thoughts ourselves. but let's start with the audience first. Does anyone have questions, comments, need more technical advice on any of these case studies? Okay, well, I'm going to.
Well, I guess, Alan, I'm pretty familiar with most of the projects myself, but
Thanks,
Jeremy,
Brandon.
I actually didn't know all the history on the Ondina project with respect to Goff Creek, and I know the city's ambition is still on the future development of the property to the south of us across Spring Boulevard. I know that they'd like to daylight that, but getting from the culvert west of us to the culvert, or I guess, to the daylighting south of us, it's still going to be in a pipe.
Yeah.
And I kind of wonder about the viability of salmon, especially taking a right angle in there somewhere in a pipe. How would that affect the viability of salmon in the stream? I mean, I think we have them in the stretch of creek west of us, but not positive about that.
Yeah, others might have some thoughts here, and yeah, you've probably seen more than I have, Brandon, but I've seen some of the development scenarios for how the creek might be daylighted or not on that property to the south, and like the last time I looked at that, the challenges I understood were really similar to the challenges we had in the early days on Ondina, which was that the city wasn't willing to bend anywhere. There wasn't a kind of a point of compromise to see that happen. And so they're willing to let someone daylight it, but they weren't also willing to reduce stream buffers then, or reduce other planning requirements to help the developer make up the yield that they would lose from doing that.
I think there may be a solution. I'm going to just throw it out there. See
Cool.
what the Salmon Safe folks think about it and what you think about it from a civil standpoint. But, I did a survey recently of how all the different jurisdictions in the east side measure their stream buffers. What's their starting point? Bellevue is the only one among all.
Brandon, we lost you. I think you might have hit your...
From top of peak rather than from the ordinary high water mark, meaning that, if the creek is sitting in a sort of a gouged channel or a little mini canyon, like it is with Goff Creek to the west, you actually measure the stream buffer starting from the top of that canyon edge, not from the shoulder of the stream itself, which is how everybody else does it. So, right. Redmond, Mercer Island, everybody. So I'm a little bit, in looking at Goff Creek, that could be a significant difference. That alone, just changing the way that definition of how you measure the buffers in Bellevue could result in some better outcomes in terms of density that may help that equation.
Yeah. I think you're right. And the only way I've seen to accomplish that, short of the city changing its code, is, and I've advised this on some that have looked at that property, is to be willing to pursue a development agreement with the city, which is onerous, but that's the only opportunity I see at the moment to try and get a site-by-site adjustment in the code requirements there.
Right.
Well, I'm going to weigh in on this too, just from the standpoint of the Puget Sound Partnership, since I serve on the ecosystems board. But, we're looking for voluntary scenarios from municipalities to increase that buffer zone. And that's just a great example, Brandon, where that could apply whether it's an urban city or a rural community. If we want salmon to survive and we want to increase the water quality potential for Puget Sound, we need to be expanding or at the very least, coming up with a consistent approach to measuring buffers. And I don't know if Bevan would want to weigh in on this, since the EPA does have a pretty substantial buffer program in the US. Bevan, do you have some thoughts on that?
Well, I'm not in the National Estuary Program anymore. I represent the Urban Waters Program and WaterSense. And so, I mean, we do support the Puget Sound Action Agenda and what you're doing as far as salmon recovery and so forth. And so, yes, where there are voluntary methods, and it's interesting for me to learn a little bit about, I haven't worked so much with Bellevue. And so it's interesting how different it is than Seattle and some of the other areas on the east side. So,
yeah, I think changing the definition to match most other jurisdictions' approach to the ordinary high water mark would actually, in Bellevue's case, would probably mean a reduction, effective reduction in buffers. My point is just that I'm not sure the way they do it has a net ecological benefit versus doing it like everyone else does from the ordinary high water mark. So, especially when it's a deep channel stream like that, what happens, up on top of the canyon edge is not as important as what happens down in it. But except for tree cover and everything else, which I get that, but that can be looked at separately. But that's just food for thought. I didn't know that's Bellevue it was surprising to me to find that Bellevue is the only one who does it the way they do it locally. So
I will say one interesting thing about that, Brandon, and I know we kind of bridge between public and private development. So mostly on public development, where we've got sort of atypical land uses and things that have been or complicated in terms of wetlands and ordinary high water mark, particularly around Lake Washington, we've involved Department of Ecology in an interpretation of the ordinary high water mark, thinking of like Rainier Beach Urban Farm, where we had, historic ditches and other things that were used as part of when it was a nursery site. And then we also have the lake and other delineated wetlands. So, if it's a complex thing, I think, it's worth kind of delving into a little bit deeper and understanding kind of and agreeing upon what that ordinary high water mark might be. And DOE has been the one that we've worked with in the past on that.
Okay.
A great point, Brandon. Thank you. I'm curious, do others have questions or comments that they'd like to make? Questions for our speakers? Well, I was going to throw one out there. I would just love a round robin between our three panelists, and others are welcome to join in. If we were to look at some examples, be it our region or even other parts of the country, where do you see more progressive codes or incentives leading really to net zero watershed impacts? What municipalities have those progressive programs going, and what could we recommend if we were to say develop a report for the city of Bellevue on some recommendations around stormwater?
I can take this first, and then everyone else can jump in. So at Salmon Safe, we're working, and I don't know if you guys are able to pull up the slide again, but it was my slide 9. We have a page of developer incentives that we show to all of the municipalities that we talk to about these. Currently, we're working with Redmond, Shoreline, and King County for their capital projects, but we've had pilot projects with City of Issaquah, Seattle Public Utilities, City of Bellevue, Shoreline. Let me see if there's any other that are on there. Yeah, I think those are the ones that are on there. Just to include these in green incentives, or give developers something to make them want to include these things on their projects. So those are the jurisdictions and municipalities anyways that are incorporating like Salmon Safe in their standards.
Thanks, Ella. I'm going to give the panelists a chance to weigh in on this too, and then I see that Bevan has the question.
I'm going to say, that's a really hard question, Ellen. I really admire how open-minded Portland has been and willing to make mistakes and try different things. I love the Tanner Springs picture that Ella's put up a couple of times there. Of kind of the Puget Sound jurisdictions, the code isn't particularly accommodating, but I think the mindset of the reviewers is open-minded, at least for stormwater at Kirkland, and I enjoy like their willingness. I appreciate their willingness to stretch and think about things and consider different alternatives. We might be infiltrating under a building for the first time in the Puget Sound area that on a Kirkland project here soon, which we do fairly regularly in Portland and Spokane, but not in the Puget Sound area. And then I think Seattle means well and tries. It's a lot of brain damage to to get the things we want to do sometimes, but I think their heart is in the right place and they're trying to improve systems to make. I mean, it's not a coincidence that the examples Jason and Ella put up of the coolest stuff in the area were all Seattle examples that, so it's not easy, but it's possible.
Great, thanks, Jeremy. Jason, did you want to share on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with Jeremy. I think that Seattle has been great, but it's probably too, because it's been the one where we've had probably the most conversations. And I do want to reiterate that, like, we try on lots of projects. It doesn't always it's not always successful, but the things that we're integrating relative to stormwater or rainwater capture, like, they often are continued conversations over long periods of time. That's why I put up that image of all of these project sites over almost 30 years. I will say that larger projects or projects that we're working on development agreements or sort of long-term code deviations, particularly as it relates to stormwater. We work with KPFF on the Alaska Airlines campus and CTAC. So written into that development agreement is the 20-year plan for that stormwater. So knowing that it wanted to be progressive and a central feature for the project, we were able to kind of very specifically deal with that language. Parks projects, because they're so unusual, we have to have these detailed conversations with the Department of Ecology. Army Corps of Engineers, we're able to do some things that are sort of above and beyond. We did the daylighting of Arboretum Creek with a recreational trail in Seattle, and again, very atypical on the way the stormwater is managed, but great, atypical in a very good way. So, to do something that's a little more progressive or sort of beyond the code, for me, has been something that's a little bit different about the permitting process, and usually face-to-face conversations with whoever's reviewing and making decisions, whether it's on ordinary high water, buffer requirements, whatever we're doing, and talking through the process.
Great, thanks, Jason. And I'll just build off of something that Jeremy said, because I concur where Portland's concerned. One of the areas I see that's a real success story for Portland in general is how they approach decision making and where they've been able to break down barriers. And I think this is something that needs to be incorporated in every city in our region, and that really is this interdisciplinary approach to land use, where in Portland, the stormwater divisions, the park divisions, the planning divisions, and capital projects are all working together in an integrated way. And I will brag about the park system in Portland, and I will encourage folks to join us in January for the parks discussion around stormwater parks. But they were able to achieve success around their stormwater program because they came at things with a shared framework, and the park system is Salmon Safe certified for over 15 years. And I would encourage anyone, if you're in the Pearl District, the Tanner Park is just a really neat place to go. It's there's a real example of dual benefits between placemaking and stormwater. And there's actually a sound feature there where you can hear water running. So I would encourage you, if you get a chance to go to Portland, check out Tanner Springs, because it's a great example and probably one of the first official stormwater parks in our region. And I think it's about 10 years old. So great stormwater park example. And now I just want to invite Bevan to ask her question.
Yeah, and I think you all answered most of my questions. I was actually going to ask a question. I wear many hats at EPA. One, like I said, one of them is WaterSense, and the other one is Urban Waters. And I actually worked with many years ago with the Lower Columbia Estuary Partnership, and I did do a tour on their stormwater in Portland, and it was pretty amazing. I was just curious. You mentioned working with Seattle Public Utilities. So for those of you who've been working on the east side, have you worked with Cascade Water Alliance on any of these issues at all? And actually the other question I had was, I was actually speaking with some folks from City of Kirkland, yesterday about some of their green permitting. And I'm wondering if that's helpful at all in the Kirkland context that you were talking about.
Do any of our panelists want to answer that?
I'm sorry, I'm embarrassed to say in all of our discussions with Kirkland and ongoing permitting, I'm not familiar with the green permitting strategy, but we'll try and find out more about that.
Yeah, I just learned about it yesterday, to be honest with you. I was just talking with them, and I just looked it up on their website earlier to find a little bit more about it, but they do kind of cover it a little bit. I mean, they're really looking at kind of high level LEED certification, the Living Futures certifications and so forth. And I think they have pretty similar goals to some of what we've been talking about here. So it was interesting. I was speaking with some folks from the planning department there.
That's great. I have not either. I am embarrassed to say that we've done a lot of projects in Kirkland, and I have not heard of them. But we'll definitely check them out. I think that, yeah, that is, sometimes it depends on the client too, a little bit, as far as their tolerance for what's achievable and kind of how much risk they want to take associated with any given project. So having allies and other folks that we can talk to and help, bolster kind of what that wants to be is great. So we'll definitely check that out.
And I will say, I've not been in any conversations with Cascade Water Alliance around the work of the 2030 district, but they are a member and a sponsor. I don't know, Riley, have you been in any conversations with them?
The person who sorry.
No, sorry. I was just going to say, no, not as of yet. Sorry, Bevan, go ahead.
It's okay. I worked with Mike Brent there. He was their water conservation lead, and now he's in management, but he works pretty regularly with the WaterSense program, and he's got some really, really interesting sustainability ideas. And actually I was talking with the City of Kirkland because they work with him because they're in his, in Cascade's service district for the water utility. So, and I've worked with him on a number of projects, sort of all over with healthcare buildings and public housing. And he does a lot of continuing education for realtors and so forth, or used to. Now it's his staff, but they're doing some really progressive work. And they're our WaterSense partner too.
Thanks, Bevan. I did see a recent presentation from the City of Kirkland, and they also have they're making a pretty big investment in stormwater parks through capital projects. And frankly, they describe to some extent the Portland scenario where their planning team, planning, parks, and surface water divisions are all working together to plan the parks, which I think is really, really important. Again, that interdisciplinary approach. I know some cities are only approaching the stormwater parks from the standpoint of the surface water department, and the park systems actually won't be involved in the decision making. But I like the direction Kirkland is going with this interdisciplinary approach. So maybe we'll invite them to an event sometime soon, either with Salmon Safe or the 2030 district to hear what they have underway. Okay. Any other questions or thoughts that folks have? Any ending remarks from our panelists? I want to be cognizant of time. We do have until 5:30, but you know, if folks want to wrap up sooner, we can do that too. Okay, I'm going to put the team on the spot. We'll go in the order in which you all spoke. Jason, one high level, exciting idea that you would throw out there.
So I'm a big fly fisherman. I love salmon in lots of different ways. And, you know, one of the things that I think that we always talk about is like what's good for the fish population and the health of Puget Sound and all that too. But I think one of the things that's really most exciting is when we can actually see fish, particularly in an urban setting. And there's been a few projects where we've been able to either reintroduce or like document like, hey, we did this daylighting and now there's fish in it. And so, you know, like I showed that picture of the Cascade neighborhood on the south end of South Lake Union. Like, could we get a little bit of stream? And we used to have our office down there. Is like even like in South Lake Union Park is a good example. Like create a little salmon bearing stream that would be in Lake Union and someday have salmon return to that portion of Seattle.
Mm-hmm. I'm with you on that, Jason.
Is that enough high level for you?
It is.
Okay.
Jeremy?
Yeah, I'd like to see City of Bellevue integrate their creek daylighting objectives with their road standards and incentivize and create incentives for developers to implement it along the way, so that we can see something like the kind of Horse Creek daylighting in Bothell implemented, particularly in the Bellred area. I think there's huge opportunity there that would create an amazing place.
I should have qualified it. It should be Mayflower Park in this case. It's not. Since we're talking Bellevue, so we want both. But it's definitely been something I've had in my mind for a long time. So.
Well, we should do both.
Oh, totally. Like whichever
it.
goes first, right?
Ella?
You know, I think that it would be really great to see more municipalities including incentives for developers. Because it really is going to start with incentivizing the developers to include this infrastructure in their projects to really get this going and have this be more of like the norm rather than going above and beyond.
I like it. Thanks, Ella. So I'm just going to end with a thought too, for all of us who are out there trying to get projects permitted or in policy, whatever influence you have. I think one of the areas where there's an opportunity for improvement, and this is part of the incentives, but kind of drilling into the micro side of things, is there's a lot of hall passes around stormwater and site development when you use LEED. LEED is based on a point system. It doesn't have a docking system if you make a bad decision, and it doesn't have enough emphasis for our region where stormwater is the signal issue of our time. And so I would say if you have an opportunity to speak with people in permit departments, policy planning, whoever it is you meet with, I'm not saying that LEED isn't a great tool, because it's absolutely a fabulous tool, but we have an opportunity to shape how LEED is used as an incentive program. And I think I would throw down the gauntlet that our local municipalities and counties need to create a hierarchy of what points within LEED are recognized for incentives and expedited permitting or reduced permitting fees, so that we can guarantee that the right choices are made around stormwater and site development. And then I would also just encourage other municipalities to do what the city of Shoreline did, and that is to add Salmon Safe, the Living Building Challenge, sustainable sites to their roster of incentive programs, so that we have a more holistic approach to watershed health that isn't just based on buildings, but it's based on the site. We have no building without the dirt beneath it. And so it's really our time, I think. Energy has had its time, transportation, healthy materials, air quality, it's all had its time in its priorities around development. And I think the time for stormwater and water quality and habitat is now. We're actually running out of time, as all of you know. And so for those of you in those conversations, I would encourage you to press harder on the decision makers that we influence, and just try to approach Puget Sound recovery in a more holistic way. So with that, I just want to thank everybody, thank our panel again, amazing people, and let us know if you have other thoughts or questions. Riley, did you have anything you wanted to end with?
I just want to say thank you so much, Ellen. This was really great. And thank you to our panelists for being here. But Ellen, you did a fantastic job as always moderating. And it's really great to have you. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and just since I am moving on, I'm just going to put my email in the chat, but you could also always check in with Riley. She'll know how to find me. And we look forward to seeing you at other stormwater events. Thank you all so much. And we really appreciate your time and your support of the 2030 district.
Thank you, Ellen. Thank you for
Thank
putting
you,
it
Ellen.
together.
Thank you, Riley.
Thank you.
Thanks.